Okay. All right, testing. Can you hear me? Awesome. Okay, good morning, everyone. Wow, I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to all that energy that they just delivered. So first off, I want to say thank you so much, Ramel, Jordan, for bringing the energy here. Stacy for helping me get prepared to tell this story to you today. I'm really excited for this opportunity, and I've never actually told all these stories all together, all in one place. And this is my first Creative Morning. So, yes. And I had first heard about Creative Mornings a couple years ago when I read the book, The Artist's Way. Anyone familiar with that one? Awesome, awesome. And during one of my self-dates, it kind of came up in the group that I was doing the book with, you should check out Creative Mornings. And I never made it because, well, one, I'm really not a morning person, so y'all are seeing me before my prime right now. Two, I'm not in one place very long. And then three, I never really thought of myself as a creative. And I know that, we just saw that beautiful slide that said, everyone is a creative. But before you come to this place, there's that barrier of, am I a creative? And it was something that I struggled with. So let's see, what kind of slides do I have up for you today? Okay. So to me, wilderness is really a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because the wilderness is my home. I've been living in a camper van since 2017, and this all starts in the scene of Grand Teton National Park. Anyone been there before? Okay, all right, so if you haven't been there, this is one of the most picturesque national parks in the country. You have to go if you want to believe me there. But to me, this idea of wilderness, it's not just a geographical description of an untouched place. It's the opportunity to explore, to embrace the unknown. It's really a state of mind, and I think y'all did a really nice job of showing that earlier in the talk. So let me set the stage for you. My husband and I had just gotten married, and we are going to go out on a 70-mile backcountry camping trip through the Tetons. That means everything we have is just on our backs. We have backpacks, we have beer canisters that are full of all the food we need for the week. We even have a water filter so that we can drink out of the glacier streams. So we are ready, we're in the rental car, we had just flown in, and we're headed into the park. And on the side of the road, we saw a camper van. And I had never seen one before. I know they're very common now, but at the time, and especially because I was living on the East Coast, I had never seen one. So I was like, Mike, pull over. And so he whipped the car around to a U-turn, and we pulled up on the dirt road to this big white camper van that was for sale on the side of the road. Got out of the car, and I pressed my face to the glass, and it was amazing. It had a bed, it had a kitchen, it had a bathroom. It was the ultimate adventure mobile. But as I stepped back from the camper van and noticed the price tag, it was $150,000. I mean, who has that kind of money for a vehicle, right? So we basically were like, well, that is never gonna happen. So we got back in the rental car, pulled up to the park, and started on our way onto this 70-mile backcountry trip. And we are hiking over the most beautiful, this is just part of it, right? Like, we are not even in the mountains yet with this photo. So we're walking over these screes that are like stones, slopes, and so they slide out from under your feet. You're walking across glaciers. Some of the oldest glaciers in America are in that park. Drinking out of those streams, like I said, it's really a magical experience. And as we walked every day, we realized that there was just something so joyous about being with everything you need on your back, having all of the minimal possessions, and every day waking up knowing that you only had to do a few things. You had to make coffee, you got to pack up your camp, and you got to start hiking. That's it. And life was simple. And we kept kicking around this idea. So we don't have cell service. We're just out there alone in the wilderness. And we kept kicking around this idea of the van, and it kept coming back to me. And then it hit me. $150,000 is super expensive for a vehicle, but it's not that expensive for a house, and especially here in San Diego, am I right? So that was the moment that this concept of home really started shifting for me. Did I want that white picket fence, or was I just told that I wanted that white picket fence? And this wasn't the first time I had grappled with the concept of home. You see, when I was 15, the company that my father worked for shut down and he was laid off. And I was told that I would be leaving the beaches of Texas, where I grew up, to the frozen tundra of Minnesota. And I mean, at 15, it's, what do? You rebel, right? Like, I have 6 months, I'm gonna make the most of it. So, I went out, I skipped school to go out with friends. I was missing my curfews. And I was really just saying yes to anything. And so the day that the movers come, I honestly was probably out getting high, right? And I missed the whole thing. But I knew I wanted to see that house one more time. And so I had my friends drop me off. And as I'm walking up to the front door, like I had so many times before, I opened it up with that key that had that little keychain from my dad's work, and that was my keychain that for this house. And I opened the door, and it was empty. Everything was gone. There's no sofa, no TV, no family photos on the wall. And I just stood there alone and cried. My home had died. My concept of home being a place had died. And so the next day, when my father and I packed up the family van to drive all the way up to Minnesota together, we got in that van, and I just had tears streaming down my face. And I watched our house on Raintree Lane disappear behind me for the last time. And after that long road trip, I even missed the picture, guys. There it is. There's that house. That's the front door I went through. Can you believe it? Look at those old vehicles. Okay. Whew. And so, wait. And so as we take this, long road trip with my father from Houston all the way to Minneapolis, and there's a small accident and a Hooters stop that we do not tell Mom about, we finally arrived to minus 20 degrees in Minnesota. I mean, have you ever experienced cold like this? I mean, my face was completely frozen, like the snot. I mean, oh my God, why did people live here? And so as I'm really struggling to find my why, like, why am I here? Why did I have to move here? Why is my life being destroyed? Ever so dramatic 15-year-old thinking. I'm laying in bed one night, asking God, like, send me a sign. And then at that exact moment, a gust of wind just smacked right into my bedroom window. And it just rattled those double panes. And that was my sign. I knew at that moment, I just had to let go. It didn't matter why, because the unknown is okay. So just let it go. And at that moment, that's when I really learned that I was going to be okay. And I didn't have to know why, and I didn't have to know how, but I knew I was going to be okay. So going back into the Tetons, where the wind is rattling my tent just as it had rattled that window in Minnesota, we kept thinking about this concept of home and what it meant to have home. And that experience in Texas, I knew that home just wasn't a place, it was people. But that meant it could be anywhere. So my husband and I decided that we were going to do it. We were just going to go all in. When we got back to Baltimore in our row house, which is like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with row houses, but it's basically like 13 foot wide and shotgun style home. I mean, our van is bigger than it now. So when we got back to Baltimore, we dove head first, and we bought the first van that we saw, and then started converting it ourselves. And so here's a photo. We're replacing all the windows, and very excited, but we didn't know anything about converting a van. Like, how do you even do plumbing or electricity? What were we going to do for money? And so the thing is about creativity is that it's not just painting or crafts. is problem solving. And we had a lot of problems that we had to figure out how to do, including what does our life look like if we go out on this epic road trip. You know, at the time, I was a science communications person in Washington, D.C. I felt very important. I had a whole career. You know, I had my PhD, and like I was on a path. You know, I've been on a path for decades, and to have a moment where you actually think about that path and why you're on it, and choose something completely different, I mean, that is terrifying. And I was scared of everything in that whole phase, during that whole 6 months when we were converting the van. I was scared of what people were going to think. I was really scared to tell my mother because, you know, your mom is your number one supporter and the number one pusher of the dream, you know, the American dream. And, you know, it didn't matter in the end what they thought because it's my life. It's my opportunity to explore the wilderness. And so, let's see, where are we going to go with this? So we did it. We hit the road. Sorry, guys. The scrolly thing is the opposite way of mine, so you know how that goes. All right, so we have a redefined home. We've built a van. I'm super scared. But the whole thing is that through this whole process, I just kept repeating the mantra, leap, and then that will appear. Has anyone else heard that one before? We have a few, but I leaned on this mantra so hard. And the crazy part was that every step that I took that like changed my trajectory in life, every scary thing where I'm just pushing through the wilderness, a path would just start forming in front of me. Every day, taking a step towards my dream created the path. And the universe just has a crazy way of working out like that. So one of the scarier things that I had to do was actually figure out what I was going to do for money. And this is 2016, so way before the remote work revolution. And I went to my communications agency and I said, I'd like to work from anywhere. And they laughed. And I said, well, I'm not joking, so I'm quitting. And they needed me, so they negotiated a 1-year career break, and I was gonna take a 1-year career break, take a little road trip, you know, just something real casual, come back to the office full time. Spoiler alert, I never went back. I mean, how could I? Come on, look at that, when that's your office. So with that part-time job, you know, secured, I was working 10 hours a week. It wasn't much, but then, you know, as I grew, I got clients and everything. I learned how to do the freelance thing. But I just remember our first night in the van, or actually, I'm going to say the night before, when we were finishing the van and, you know, purging the house, getting rid of all of our belongings, putting them either in storage or Goodwill or, you know, the dumpster. That last night, I was up till 3 a.m. trying to jam way too many clothes into way too small of a closet. And I was just crying because I was like, I didn't purge enough yet. And like at that point, my second bedroom was my closet. So this was a serious situation for me to have to downsize. I do give talks about minimalism now, so I'm not talking about that today. But eventually I got it all crammed in there and we headed out on the road. So the first day we actually drove from Baltimore all the way to Ohio, and we had dinner at the Cuyahoga National Park. And we pulled up at sunset and we opened the slider door and we set out the table and camping chairs and we cooked dinner outside, and it was the best dinner. And I don't even remember what it was. Like, I don't remember what we ate. What I remember is the feeling of knowing that all of those struggles that we had been worth it, that we were in the place that we were supposed to be, and that the wilderness was my home. I'm an outdoor person. Air conditioning and me, you know, I'd rather be outdoors, especially in San Diego. So that wild unknown has been my home ever since. And I've been houseless for the last 5 years. And my journey has been circuitous, both literally and figuratively. I traveled to 49 states, Alaska still to go, and my husband is actually there right now. And I've gone to 25 national parks. And I basically take these routes across the country based on 70-degree weather, so you can see why I'm in San Diego so often. But at every stop, when I'd open that slider door of the van and set up my little office or maybe walk the dog or something, people would always come by and say, "You're living my dream." There's the little dog. They would always say, "You're living my dream." And that never sat well with me, because why was I the only one who could achieve this dream? I shouldn't be so privileged. Other people should have that opportunity. And so I started sharing my story on social media. I started sharing about, how we built the van, how we found places, how we found resources on the road. And my account just blew up. And the craziest thing was that I was finally starting to feel like a creative person. After so many years of having that scientist hat on and that scientist identity, and being married to an actual artist who does ink and watercolor paintings for a living, I just never felt that I was that creative person. But doing social media, I learned how to take photos that tell a story. And I learned how to write better, in shorter sections, right? Mark Twain's famous, "If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter." And that creativity, it had been inside of me all along. It had just run dormant. And I needed this wilderness experience to really pull it out of me. And so the reality of #vanlife would soon set in. Oh, sneak peek. We're going back to this one first. You didn't see that? Okay. So the reality of #vanlife would soon set in, because the road is unforgiving, y'all. It is difficult to find places to camp that are safe, that are affordable, and specifically have cell service for a remote job. So many times I have driven down a dirt road where the washboards are just rumbling your brain for an hour, only to get to a spot that had the promised epic view, but no cell service at all. So with a 8 a.m. client call, I'd have to turn around and go back and park at a Walmart or a rest stop and camp next to giant diesel rigs who are idling their loud engines all night long. And I think this is the part of life on the road that a lot of folks don't talk about, because it's not glamorous, right? It's not what you want to see. It's not those Instagram-worthy shots. And then aside from that, the worst part was that I was lonely. And I was traveling with my husband. And the thing is, if you expect your partner to be your everything, you're going to be disappointed. You can't do that. I really missed friendly faces, familiar people, my favorite bartender at my favorite restaurant, and waving at neighbors. And you just don't get that when you're nomadic and traveling, all the time. But what I realized through social media is that there were people like me out there. There were people who said, "Fuck the system. I'm going to just do what I want. I am not waiting till I'm too old to travel. I don't care about your white picket fence dream. I'm going in the wilderness." And that was always incredible to connect with them, but it never seemed like it worked out in real time. And we kept missing each other. And it turned out, I never posted where I was in real time, and neither does anyone else. So the story continues. And you kind of already got a sneak peek of this. So one winter day, we had spent about 2 months chasing snow, going skiing, snowboarding, working, and doing that balance that was working really well for us. But then the worst thing possible happened. We ran into a herd of elk, and that's what those photos are about. So we were driving on a dark country road, and a herd of elk just crossed right in front of us, perpendicular. And one of them ran into the driver's side of the vehicle. One of them came through the windshield right in front of me and shattered glass all over me. And I mean, this was horrendous. I can't even describe how horrendous this was. I'm gonna try. So my husband pulls over, and I turn around to look in the back of the van, and all of the cabinets have opened up and spilled their contents out into the floor. As we get out of the van to assess the damage of what happened to the vehicle, this is what we saw. The front end just completely crumpled. There's a dead elk on the side of the road, and I had a dead home again. Once again, my home had died. And this time we were actually homeless. I mean, we did not have a place to go. And so in this moment where we were just so devastated, and this is a traumatic situation. We started finding, again, that leap in the net will appear. Things kept kind of going in our favor, I guess you could say, even though this is like a pretty horrible situation. And someone tagged me on a post on Instagram, and this was kind of some of the start of the magic. Someone tagged me on a post on Instagram, and they said, oh, there's a van for sale in Bozeman, Montana, which is 9 hours from Sun Valley. And I'm like, well, I can't afford a van, for one, For two, 9 hours, I don't know, is this worth it? And so that night we had slept, so we disassembled that van. We took everything else that we could salvage. Even those windows that I had shown you that we had installed earlier, we took those windows out. And they are actually, spoiler, in our new van. And so when we were sleeping in the front seat of a rental van, so think a white, big cargo van that your parents tell you not to get in, right? So we have all of our shit in the back and, just jumbled up, and it's Idaho, so it's freezing. And so we are sleeping in the front seats with whatever blankets or something that we had. There's no insulation, there's no heater, we are just freezing our asses off. And then at 4 a.m., I just couldn't take the cold anymore. After the accident, we said we would never drive at night again, and we're still pretty good about that. But at 4 a.m., it was still dark, but I couldn't take the cold anymore, and I said, we got nothing else to lose. Let's go to Bozeman. So we headed up to Bozeman, and we arrived to the dealership 5 minutes before another buyer. So I was like, okay, this is a sign. Let's just roll with it. And we decided to take a test drive of a new van. And my husband got behind the wheel, and it was the first time he smiled in a week since the accident. And I just knew we had to do it. I mean, when you see that smile, you gotta do it. So we crunched the numbers, and we realized that the monthly payment was really only $200 more expensive. So there we go, the obligatory shot with a little chihuahua, little Vinny in there. My husband thinking I'm crazy again. So we did it once again. And then we started out east. We wanted to go back to Philly. We were gonna build the van at the in-laws' place. And on our way out there, I got a call from someone named Brienne, who's in the audience here today. I'd never met Brienne. We had known each other through Instagram. She was also traveling in a camper van with her wife, Lacey. And we had crossed paths, but never actually connected. It was one of those moments that I was telling you about earlier. And so Bree calls me up. I'm like, okay, one, she's calling me. I've never talked to her. I've never met her. This is strange. And then she says, I have a business in San Diego, and we upfit camper vans, and I also have a rental fleet. So I would love if you could, you could come and you can stay in one of our rental vans and build your new van in our shop, and you have a space here. Lacey. I wasn't expecting to cry there. And, that was just the most generous thing a stranger could ever offer. I mean, what kind of person does that? Okay. And I didn't end up taking Bree up on her offer. But I knew she was going to be someone special in my life. So in about a month, when we had finished building the van, and yes, a month is crazy to build a van in, but I was sleeping in my husband's childhood bedroom, surrounded by Little League baseball trophies. So I couldn't stay there. So we built the van in 30 days, and San Diego was one of our first stops. And I had to meet this stranger that had been so generous. And it turned out that we started traveling together. There's Lacey. That summer, we traveled all over the country together, and it turned out we kind of liked each other, and we kind of worked well together, and we had similar schedules. You know, at that time, a lot of the other van lifers I knew, they wanted to go off-grid for weeks at a time, and they didn't have jobs, or they just did something that wasn't like what I was doing, and I needed to have service. Like, I had clients on the East Coast, and y'all know that East Coast life don't stop. So I couldn't just go off-grid and disappear. And, you know, Bree and her wife, Lacey, were also running remote business, well, kind of remote businesses, I guess, at the time. And so we just really clicked. We knew we needed to be places with cell service. And then Brianne told me about this idea that she had to build an app that would help people solve the problems that I was just telling you about, how to find campsites, how to connect with community on the road. And I was like, well, I need that app. So I am in. I am so in on building this with you. And so, let's see, where do we go? I know this story. But the problem was, I didn't go to business school. I don't know anything about building a business. You know, I have a PhD in biochemistry, but what the hell does that have to do with a startup business? But I do know that I have grit, and I have determination, and I am not afraid of walking into the wilderness. So I'm proud to say that in 2019, we launched Seeker, the app, and last week, actually, we just relaunched 2.0, which helps people find campsites and connection, and even works offline, which, as you know, is one of my major pain points. And the thing is that we were actually able to build the product that we needed. We were actually able to build a community that can help people feel less alone in the wilderness. Because the thing is, everyone should be able to say, I'm living my dream. I'm living my own dream. They shouldn't be jealous of someone else's, and Seeker is there because we want to empower people who weren't as privileged to grow up with comfort in the wilderness to actually get out there and explore and pave their own way in a leave no trace kind of way, of course. So, you know, we had built this business, and we got through the wilderness, and some days are still very much like the wilderness. Some days are still very much like, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's okay. And all the while, you can choose to, you know, be anxious and be worried and be like, why is this happening to me? But I just have to keep going back to that moment in Minnesota when the why doesn't matter. Like, we are in this, keep moving forward, trust the process. So I want to leave you all with a few things today that will help you enter bravely into the wilderness. 1, don't be afraid of uncertainty. It's a given. Just go brave into that night. 2, take steps towards your dreams. They can seem really big and really lofty and really fucking far away. But every day you take a step towards it, it gets a little closer. So keep dreaming big and just start walking towards it. On your way to that goal, I want you to know that if it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end of your journey. You are not there yet. And then the final remark is get outside. Even if it's just for a few minutes every day. There we go, okay, last slide. There are so many clinical studies about the effects of nature on your health, on your well-being, mental health, on your blood pressure, diabetes. Literally, you name it, nature is good for it. So get out there, and thank you so much for listening to my story, and I will see you out there.